Hi, I'm Karen Morgan. I'm an executive council member with AARP Maryland and a lead fraud volunteer and advocate. And I'm here for Protect Week 2025. And this is the first of a series of interviews on social media where we talk with experts in the fraud space to help you stay safe. Today, I am thrilled to be able to have as my guest Liz Buser, who is senior advisor with the AARP Fraud Watch Network and the AARP Fraud Watch program. And she's been focusing on nothing but fraud since 2011. And she helps our internal and external partners coordinate to keep people safe in the fraud space. She also manages the emotional support program that AARP has developed for victims of fraud. So, Liz, we are so happy to have you here for Protect Week.
Thanks so much for having me, Karen. And it's funny. Normally, I'm interviewing you on Facebook Live, so it's fun to be here with you in the reverse role.
Yes, revenge is a dish best served cold. So, no, we are very happy to have you, and it's about time for this. So let's just get right into it. Fraud is a major problem right now and has been for a long time. But one of the things that people keep asking questions about when I'm doing presentations and when you are too has to do with artificial intelligence. So, in your opinion, what kind of impact does artificial intelligence have on scams? Why does that kind of freak people out?
That's a great question, Karen. AI technology, which includes voice mimicking software, deep fake videos, and chatbots like ChatGPT, it can be used for good, but it can also be used by bad actors. And I think a lot of the anxiety that people feel is because we all fully don't understand how AI works. But unfortunately, in this case, what AI does is it gives scammers the ability to impersonate anybody. So it could be your child or grandchild, a police officer, a celebrity, a government official, or even your spouse. And it's really just the tip of the iceberg as we learn more about AI's capabilities. The good news is, though, there's ways that we can protect ourselves as AI fuels more sophisticated scams. For example, don't trust your caller ID because scammers can spoof numbers. Don't click on a link in an email or a text message before confirming that it's from a legitimate source. Make sure you guard your personal information and more. And then
Mhm.
on the positive side, too, AI is being used to help fight scams. That's the good news as well. So, for
Mhm.
example, AI is being used by financial institutions to detect suspicious transactions, like unusual charges on your credit card. And it's also being used to stop illegal robocalls, flag scam emails, and more. So we have a lot of great articles on the Fraud Watch Network website, aarp.org/fraudwatch network about AI. So I encourage you to check them out.
Thank you. That is great information, and that's an awesome resource. Now, here's what I'm hearing, and you hear so much confusing information. Sometimes when I read blog posts or news articles by experts, they say that the impact of artificial intelligence on crime is overblown. And then I read other experts who say, "Oh my goodness, it's the apocalypse, and it's here right now." So it's hard to know exactly how much to zero in on AI as a factor because, I mean, criminals can use old school tactics to make successful fraud crimes too. So I guess I'm wondering if you've heard of some recent examples of scams involving AI that you've heard about. Do you think the hype around AI on fraud is overblown, or where do you think that falls?
Karen, I think you make a great point. The scammers are still relying on the tried and true, evergreen scams that have been out there. It's just AI is helping them to be a bit more sophisticated. So one example I can give you is an online romance scam. I know somebody where the criminal was using AI to impersonate a military service member during video conversations. And we've also heard of other examples of romance scams that have used AI, deep fakes during these conversations. So romance scams are, a scam we've heard about for a long time now, right? And it's unfortunately heartbreaking. Another example are celebrity imposter scams. We've certainly seen an increase in those. And in these cases, the deep fake videos are supposedly showing celebrities endorsing fake products, because what the criminals want to do is they want to get you to go to a fraudulent website where you enter your personal and financial information, because that's their goal, right? We talk about this a lot. They want your money and they want your personal information. I think another example that's perhaps a bit newer is how AI is being used in cryptocurrency investment scams. And so the criminals will create fake websites and cryptocurrency trading platforms that supposedly show you that the small investment you made has actually led to a huge return. So you're made to think you have all this money. But in reality, it's all fake, and the criminals are just using it to try and convince you to send even more money that you'll never get back. And then, of course, there's fake images that are out there, fake articles, fake social media profiles, and all of that, can be created using artificial intelligence. Scammers are also using AI to create sophisticated-looking phishing emails too. Phishing, we've talked a lot about that over the years, especially. It's just that AI is making the emails look even more sophisticated. So whereas in the past, you knew to look for, grammatical errors, things that just don't seem right. But AI is helping the emails to look much more polished and professional, because again, the criminals want you to click on the links. They want to get your personal information and or your money. And I think the bottom line is this. And I'm sure we're going to talk about how we can all protect ourselves, but there's steps we can take to protect ourselves and our loved ones. And I think part of that, the first step, is to recognize we can't fully trust communication, especially if it's unsolicited. So we need to take the time to do our research and to verify legitimacy.
Right. And that is a game changer in the modern age. Trust nothing, unless it's like in the physical world. There's like this online world, and then there's the physical world. And it's like, if you can't like actually touch it, it may not be real, even if you're seeing it, even if you're hearing it. And that is just so hard to understand, like at an intuitive level. I mean, intellectually we get it, but we don't, but trying to understand it inside where it counts, so that when the phone rings or when you see the video, it's like, oh, I don't trust that. Having that conversation with yourself is really hard.
Absolutely. I think there are ways, though, and there's some red flags, which I think we're going to talk about, ways that we can remind ourselves, okay, just take a moment, analyze the situation, and, recognize whether if something doesn't seem right, go with your spidey sense. I would say go with your spidey sense, trust your gut. Yes. If something doesn't seem right, it probably isn't.
Yes, exactly. And now before we get to things that people can do, let me just circle back to a word that keeps coming up in our conversation. And the word for today is imposter. So can you please tell me and tell our audience, what are imposter scams, just generically speaking, for those people who may not know? And what are some red flags we should look out to spot those imposter scams?
Karen, going back to what we were just saying, how, there's so many types of scams that have been around forever. It's just the tactics that scammers are using, how they're reaching out to us and whatnot are what's changed. And imposter scams have been around forever, and they're exactly what they sound like. The criminals are posing as someone or something else to try and convince you, again, to send them your money or to give them your personal information. So a couple of examples of ones that I'm sure all of your audience has heard about. First of all, government imposter scams. So the scammers are impersonating the IRS, Medicare, Social Security, local law enforcement, and more. There's business imposter scams where they're impersonating, like utility companies or
Mm-hmm.
Amazon or PayPal or other known businesses that are out there. We've all heard about tech support scams, where Microsoft or Apple or other tech companies are supposedly reaching out to you. Of course, there's romance scams, which are so heartbreaking. There's grandparent scams where the scammers will impersonate a grandchild or some other loved one. I mentioned celebrity imposter scams before, where the scammers are impersonating a celebrity. And then there's sweepstakes scams. How long have we heard about the Publishers Clearinghouse, sweepstakes scams, right? So
Mm-hmm.
those are just a few examples of the ones that are out there. I think, as I said, there are ways that we can protect ourselves and protect others as well. The biggest red flags, I think, for any scam type, especially these imposter scams. First of all, if you get an unexpected communication that gets you into a heightened emotional state, whether it's fear or excitement or love, and it involves urgency, chances are it's a scam.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to that emotional state, that heightened emotional state, that's the scammer's goal. They want to get you under the ether. They want to get you into that heightened emotional state, because then our rational thinking goes out the window. And so what the scammers are doing is they're actually using our own brains and our own thought processes against us, because we talk about this, as long as you're under the ether, the criminals are going to succeed. Another tip is, if somebody, especially a stranger, says to you, don't tell anybody, it's so important you don't tell anybody, that's another huge red flag.
Mm-hmm.
Another red flag we talk about is if you get asked, especially if it's coupled by the unexpected communication that gets you into the heightened emotional state and it involves urgency. So if you're asked to pay for something through a conventional payment method, like cryptocurrency, like peer-to-peer payment apps, like wire transfers and gift cards, it is a scam, full stop. The reason why scammers love these payment methods is because they're virtually untraceable. And once the money is sent, it is likely gone forever, unfortunately. So just a general tip, and I talked a bit about it earlier, don't engage if you receive a call or an email. Instead, reach out to the person or the organization that is contacting you through a known and trusted phone number or email address. I cannot stress enough, please always verify and take the time to do your research. And please don't share any personal or financial information unless you know for certain that it is a legitimate request and or a legitimate person that you are in contact with. I want to mention the Fraud Watch Network helpline again. Our phone number is 877-908-3360. You can call the helpline and we can help you figure out if something, whether it's an offer or a person or a company, is or isn't legitimate, whether it's a scam. We can help walk you through figuring that out.
And you don't need to be a member of AARP to take advantage of this awesome resource.
Absolutely. You can be, no geographic limitations. It's completely free resource. You don't need to be a certain age and you don't need to be an AARP member.
And what are the hours of the Fraud Watch Network helpline? I believe it's like 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday?
So our trained, I'm glad you asked that. Our trained staff and volunteers are available Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern time.
Okay. So that's something to keep in mind if you're calling from California or if you're calling, but you can call, like you said, you can call from anywhere in the country and get your questions answered. You can also report scams to the AARP Fraud Watch Network. And I believe the AARP Fraud Watch Network is the largest non-law enforcement reporter of scams in the country to the Federal Trade Commission. So it's so making that resource available is huge. Are there other ways in the ARP in AARP lingo we talk about hardening the target, right?
Mhm.
And which is a really cool way of saying, you're protecting yourself against scams, but hardening the target just sounds so cool. Um, so so besides what you said about, being skeptical about phone calls, communications from out of the blue, urgency. Are there other ways in which people can so-called harden the target so that we can be more proactive in protecting ourselves and people, our family and friends?
Absolutely. And I know you and I could talk for hours about this, right, Karen? But
Yes.
I'll limit it to just four or five. So, first of all, use better passwords. So, make sure every account you open has a unique password. The longer and stronger your passwords are, and the less they make sense to anybody but you, the better. So,
Hmm.
instead of a normal password, think of a phrase or a sentence, and then take the first letter of each word, add some special characters, and make that your password. There are also password apps out there. There's like 1Password and Dashlane and Bitwarden, just to name a few. And some have both a limited free tier and a subscription option. But again, do
Right.
your research to verify what is legitimate. Second tip, activate multi factor authentication, or MFA. What it means is that to get into your accounts, you'll need your username, your password, and then an additional piece of information. So it could be in the form of a code that's sent to your device, or maybe it's a biometric like facial
Hmm.
recognition, or maybe you use a separate authentication app that you previously downloaded. MFA can be a bit of an inconvenience, but it's so important to safeguard your account this way when it is an option. It is absolutely worth any inconvenience you think that there is.
Hmm.
Third, I would say review your credit report and freeze your credit. Under federal law, you can receive your free credit report from each of the three major credit bureaus. So Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. It's a good idea to request one free credit report from each credit bureau every few months, and you can do that at annualcreditreport.com. And that way you can periodically check your credit report for free throughout the year to look for suspicious transactions. And at that same website, annualcreditreport.com, you can get the contact information for those three agencies so you can freeze your credit. What
Hmm.
freezing your credit does is it helps to prevent identity thieves from using your personal information to open new financial accounts in your name. And then
Hmm.
you unfreeze your credit when you want to apply for a credit card or loan. And then after all of that's done, make sure to refreeze your account.
Yeah.
The other ones I wanted to mention are to keep your antivirus and operating software up to date. So it'll help deter intruders, and make sure you set your updates to auto update so you can strengthen your security based on newly discovered threats and any patches that are put out, because it helps to patch the holes in the armor, so to speak. And then
Hmm.
finally, I want to go back to what we talked about before. Don't click on links or answer unknown calls. We get so many robocalls and spam and scam texts. And I'm sure, Karen, while we've been talking, each of us has gotten quite a few. But there are ways to reduce the volume. So, first of all, check with your phone carrier for ways that they can help block or flag suspicious calls. You might want to consider small, call and text blocking apps as well. The only one I know of right now that works on landlines is Nomo Robo, but there's lots of mobile apps. So Nomo
Right.
Robo, RoboKiller, Haya, and Truecaller, just to name a few. But again, do your research to verify the legitimacy before you invest in those opportunities.
Okay, those all sound like great tips. And with regard to passwords, like you said, it can be a real pain. And I know like my mom would often complain to me about the number of passwords. And I told her, just get like a little notebook and write them down for the account, or set up something on your phone that's like a note-taking app and put put them there, but then lock that down. And that's what she ended up doing. And it really alleviated a lot of stress in terms of passwords, because you really should have a separate, unique one for every single account. That could be 30, 50 different
Yeah.
passwords, which is hard for any human to keep track of. Um, so we are getting close to the end of our time. So can you remind us of AARP's free fraud prevention and victim support resources?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me today and for all the work,
Mhm.
Karen, that you and AARP Maryland are doing in Protect Week and beyond that. I think, as fraud criminals have access to these increasingly sophisticated tactics that we talked about today, like AI, it's more important than ever to stay informed on the latest scams and red flags. And so AARP is here to help. I want to mention AARP's Fraud Watch Network helpline again, 877-908-3360. You can call the helpline to report a scam or get support if you or a loved one have fallen victim. You can get one-on-one support from more than 150 helpline volunteers and staff. They are absolutely incredible. And they will stay on the phone with you as long as you need their assistance, and they can help you also figure out whether something is or isn't legitimate. In
Yeah.
addition to that, we talked before about how AARP has the AARP Fraud Victim Support Group. AARP.org/fraud support is the link to that. The support group was created about 4 years ago because people were calling the helpline, and when they were reporting fraud, they were saying, is there anybody who's going through what I'm going through that I can talk to? So I know I'm not alone. So I'm not the only one going through this. And so the support group provides a safe space for fraud victims and or their loved ones to address the emotional impact of fraud victimization, because it's often even more devastating than the financial toll. So those are our victim support resources. But of course, we talked a lot about prevention today. And so I encourage you to check out our website, aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork. There you can sign up for our watchdog alert emails or text messages. They're available in English and in Spanish, because that way you can stay up to date on the latest scams that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
We have a scam tracking map. We have a podcast called The Perfect Scam. We also have articles and tip sheets and videos about how scams operate, the latest scams out there, and how you can protect yourself and your loved ones. And then I also want to mention all of the AARP state offices, like AARP Maryland, are a wealth of information, both virtually and in community. So thank you again for the important work that you're doing. And then I should mention all of our resources, as we talked about, are free. To repeat, they're for anybody of any age, and you don't need to be an AARP member. The last resource I wanted to mention, Karen, is aarp.org/say this. We talk a lot, as you know, about how words matter when talking to
Mm-hmm.
fraud victims. And one of the reasons why fraud is so underreported is because of the blame and shame that victims feel. And so we're asking everybody, please change the words that you use, and recognize that fraud is not the victim's fault. It's the criminal's fault, and that is where the blame belongs. So I encourage everyone to check out aarp.org/say this to learn more about how words matter.
They totally matter. People have committed suicide over their devastation relating to fraud, especially with romance scams. And so it's so critical that AARP is providing the emotional support, because we don't talk enough about that. I mean, AARP does, but I mean, the world in general doesn't talk enough about the serious emotional impact. And also that if we can get rid of the shame,
Yeah.
then people are more likely to report the crime. And when you report the crime, that is your way of holding the criminals accountable. When you don't report the crime, it's like you're taking on the blame yourself. And we are desperately asking everybody out there to not do that, because it gives the criminals a pass. and we can't do that. Words matter, and not only the words we use for victims, but the words that we use for the criminals too. We need to stop referring to them as gentlemen, and we need to stop referring to them as smart and amazing. And so, whatever complimentary words we're using, we need to stop that. They're scumbags. That's it.
Absolutely.
They're creepy. They're creepy, crappy scumbags. That's what they are. That's why they're doing what they do.
They're transnational criminal organizations perpetrating these crimes. And, here's how underreported fraud is. I'll use the 2023 Federal Trade Commission statistics. So in 2023, the FTC reported that, $10 billion was stolen by criminals through fraud. But at the end of last year in October, the FTC released a report to Congress, and they said that in reality, more than 158, I believe, billion dollars.
Yes.
What they actually think fraud losses were in 2023. So it's a huge number.
Yes, tenfold more than what we're hearing about.
Shows you how underreported fraud is. And it's just devastating, but we can all make a change. We can change our words. We can, share the information we learned today and that we learned from AARP and other organizations with our loved ones, so we can all stay safe and protected.
Excellent. Liz, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap it up here. We so appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, because watching fraud makes you really, really busy. So we really appreciate you taking the time out to help everyone stay safer. And I just want to let everyone know this social media broadcast is part of our Protect Week campaign at AARP Maryland. If you go to aarp.org/Maryland/Protect Week, you'll find everything that we have relating to Protect Week resources. And you'll find this interview with Liz once we post that, and our other social media interviews where we talk about how people can stay safe from fraud. So, Liz, thank you so much for being part of our Protect Week campaign and for being just a trusted, amazing, valued partner all year long. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Karen. Love being here with you.